Are we recording? Okay. All right. There we go. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join our briefing for legislators and staffers on energy affordability. We are expecting at least two of our sponsors and leaders to come. Assemblymember Simon will be joining us, as will Assemblymember Tapia. And of course, we're also grateful for the support and sponsorship of Senator Krueger and Senator Harckham. So I'm just looking at the list of all of you who are here. And
We are here.
everybody's here. Okay, great. So we will dive in and not wait another moment. I know how valuable everyone's time is and how busy everyone is. And there are so many competing priorities right now. I don't have to tell all of you, the moment that we're in, but just want to, again, thank you so much for being here and caring about this issue. My name is Betta Broad. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Organizing at the Association for Energy Affordability. And I also wear another hat as the Campaign Director of New Yorkers for Clean Power. Now, we are here today to talk about energy affordability in New York State. But I wanted to also just mention, because it's the elephant in the room, that we are at an unprecedented moment in American history where we have the richest man in the entire world slashing programs at the federal level that are going to impact so many people that already are impacting seniors and kids and the most vulnerable members of our society. Now, this is a tragedy. And how have we gotten here? Well, I think one of the main reasons is that people have lost faith in our government, in elected officials, in our systems. And this is a shame because I know, and you know, that we have amazing elected officials who are fighting every day to make New York State better, to improve people's lives, to fight for affordability. And we need to work very hard and continue in this dire moment to make sure that New Yorkers know that and that we all work together so that the Trumpocalypse, as I like to call it, does not hurt New Yorkers any more than, it inevitably will. We know that people are scared. I can't imagine the number of calls that people are getting to their offices from constituents who are scared that their, grandmother is going to be taken to Guantanamo. I mean, God knows, people afraid to go to the hospital because they're afraid they're going to get deported. This is a terrible moment. And to also be afraid, as they have for so long, that their utility bills are going to get shut off. I mean, we know that people are actually, as of December 2024, just this past December, over 1.3 million residential energy consumer accounts are 60 plus days behind on payments. People are scared they're going to get their bills shut, their electricity shut off, or their heat shut off. And they are. I mean, ratepayers owe a total of over $1.85 billion to their utilities. I mean, this is terrible. And there are many things that we can do to address energy affordability that we're going to hear about today. Now, it's very topical, very timely, especially because you may have heard that Con Edison also just asked for a big rate increase. Most of the rate increases for gas are going to go up $46 a month. I mean, that is astounding. And that really hurts the people who can afford to pay it the least. And this is just the latest in a long line of requested and approved gas rate hikes that have been happening across the state. Now, these rate hikes are happening because utilities are spending billions of dollars every year on gas infrastructure. And these costs aren't falling on people equally. We know that. We know low-income families and seniors are carrying a disproportionate burden when it comes to paying energy bills. And we saw that the governor is taking note of these rate hikes and calling on the PSC to reject Con Ed's rate hikes and look into executive salaries. And so we appreciate that. We appreciate the governor, paying attention to this. Of course, how could we not? but we need to make sure that we're taking action for affordability. And so we're going to hear today about some of the root causes of energy affordability, the energy affordability crisis, and some of the policy solutions that the legislature can enact to address both the short-term and the long-term ways that we can help New Yorkers and bring down costs. And not only can we bring down costs and help on the energy affordability side of things, but we can also help the climate crisis, because we shouldn't have to choose between heating and eating, and we also shouldn't have to choose between having our electricity and heating and having clean air and a livable climate for future generations. We can show the country that New York is proving that climate and energy affordability can go hand in hand. And I'm so grateful to all of you for working every day to make sure that these policies are being enacted and fighting so hard, coming to our rallies, being in the streets, doing everything you can to urge leadership to get these bills and these policies across the finish line. So thank you so much. And thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to pass it off to Assemblymember Tapia, who has been working so hard. And I had the great pleasure of handing out ice cream with a couple of summers ago for New York heat. And we're still at it, but I know this is going to be the session that we finally make this a reality. So thank you so much. And thank you also, Assemblymember Simon, for being here, for being our new co-sponsor. We're so excited to have you as a sponsor of this bill. And so want to pass it off to both of you, our champions. Thank you so much for everything that you do every day to fight for New Yorkers.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you? I mean, yes, we've been doing this forever because I mean, last summer we did it in my district several times, and the whole year we've been doing it because I mean, my district is one of the ones that suffered the most from energy. It's incredible what is happening, and already 1 in 7 New Yorkers household are already 2 or more months behind in paying their electricity. And that is terrible because in my office is getting these constituents every week, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10 that cannot pay the utility, and we had to help them to see how they're going to find the money to pay because I mean they cannot in this winter they cannot live without the heat, and I know firsthand from constituents in my district who struggle with rising energy costs, and this issue is now more urgent than ever. But none of that has stopped utility companies from charging more and more and more for the same heat that they've been giving all along. Just last week, Con Edison filed for another rate hike. That means that gas bills could reach nearly $100 more every month. Can you imagine that? Not even us can do that. Hold on, put this on. Not even us that could pay $100 more every single month for that. Con Edison isn't the only one. Every single utility company has raised prices for New Yorkers. And that's a fact. And it's not because gas is more expensive. The price of gas itself has actually gone down, and we know that. Utilities are just charging New Yorkers more so we can subsidize more dangerous and expensive frack gas pipes and pipelines. And we cannot allow that to happen. We simply can keep asking people to pay more and more for the dirty gas system that's killing them. That is why we need the New York Heat Act. New York Heat would limit utility bills to 6% of a family's income and save the families who need help most, an average of $136 every month on their energy bill. So I think, I mean, that this is the year that we have to make sure that New York Heat Act is a reality in every single of our communities and in our district all over the state of New York. And I thank all of you for putting this together. My colleagues, Senator Krueger, Senator Harckham, and of course my sister, Joanne, for making sure and for continue the fight that we haven't stopped and that we are not stopped, because I mean, we're thinking that this is the year and we're gonna fight harder and harder to make sure that the New York Heat Act is passed this year and it becomes a reality. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Tapia. Appreciate all of that. And yes, this is going to be the year. We have to think positively. And I will welcome our new sponsor, but longtime champion. Thank you so much for being here, Assemblymember Simon.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for organizing this and bringing it together. I want to thank my sister Yudelka. We go back a long way, and I'm going to start serving ice cream. I think that's a great idea. I hadn't done that last year, so maybe this year. But hopefully we will have passed the New York Heat Act, and we won't need to pass out as much ice cream next year. So, you know, everybody has talked about what this would do. I think what is, so critical to keep in mind is the fact that, yes, we have these rate hikes every time you turn around. The other day in my district, not only is the regular rate hike, but also they're paying off their liabilities for having polluted the Gowanus Canal for 150 years onto the ratepayers. So it's like the victim paying the liability of the tortfeasor, for any of you lawyers there. So it's completely insane and completely unfair. And this is, as you know, going to set back so many New Yorkers who are already struggling to pay their bills. The other thing, of course, is that gas is not any more expensive. The price of gas went down. The last time prices of gas were going crazy high was in the 70s. And the reality is that the United States has more energy than ever before, and the price is going down. So the only thing that's going up is the cost of running these dirty fossil fuel utilities, right? It costs them more because that equipment is outdated. It costs them more because they're having to use older equipment. It costs them more because they're having to build more fossil fuel pipelines, et cetera, in order to keep using this cheap gas for them. So gas is not cheaper for everybody. It's much more expensive. And the same thing with electricity. And the corporate titans are making money hand over fist. They have not lost any money during the downturn, during the pandemic. They all made more money during the pandemic. It's the rest of us who did. So this is completely inequitable. And as you know, Betta, you mentioned, Trump and the effects that they are already working on passing before we pass our budget. A very, very destructive federal budget that will definitely harm New Yorkers. There are tremendous efforts that they've made already to punish New York, but this will punish everyday New Yorkers. And so we are going to need to make sure that we protect ratepayers. And we're also going to need to make sure that we stop spending money on things we don't need to spend money on. And there are a variety of ways we can do that. So we have to do all of those things. And we need to find a way to do it in this budget, because we are going to be, there's going to be a lot of very hurting people. So, working on energy affordability is huge. Working on cleaning up the climate for the future generations and for us is going to make even more of a difference now than ever before. So we needed it, now we need it even more. So I'm just delighted to be joined by so many advocates who are much more articulate on this than I am, to brief everybody on how the New York Heat Act works and how it will protect New Yorkers. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank Senator Krueger and Senator Harckham for their support and their advocacy that they've been doing forever and ever on this issue. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us.
Thank you so much. As I said, we're so grateful to have such incredible, dedicated, passionate, visionary, committed elected officials such as yourselves, and being in this fight with you is truly an honor. So thank you for everything you do every day to improve New Yorkers' lives. I now want to turn it over to another woman I greatly admire in the movement, Laurie Wheelock, who is the executive director of PULP, the Public Utility Law Project. Laurie is a longtime champion of energy affordability and really an expert on this issue, and is going to walk us through some of the most pressing policy actions that we can take today to help New Yorkers as they're facing, historically high bills. Thank you for being here, Laurie.
Well, thank you so much, Betta, and thank you, Assemblymembers Simon and Tapia, for hosting today, to Senators Krueger and Harckham and everyone who's on with us. It means so much, especially on behalf of PULP, who is on the front line every single day trying to help low-income customers, to just see the outpouring of support when it comes to energy affordability. So I know we're going to have a lovely slideshow coming up any moment. And where PULP is going to start is by explaining who we are briefly. So PULP stands for the Public Utility Law Project. Our acronym is PULP. Everything in energy has an acronym. But our organization is a nonprofit that specializes in assisting low-income utility customers with their utility issues. So we do everything from rate cases. Last year, we were in 8 rate cases. This year, so far, 3. So that's good for our small but mighty team of 10. But we also do policy, and we do, again, direct services. We work with a lot of your offices to help low-income customers stop that shut off from happening when they fall behind on their bills. And while that work is extremely hard right now, and we're seeing the panic and the struggle on the ground, we learn from those experiences. We elevate, we empower those individuals, and we know that you all have our backs, and that just means so much. So thank you for that. We can go to the next slide. And where we're going to talk today as PULP is I'm going to do some level setting. How do we set rates in New York? It can be very, very complex, but we're going to do a very high level. What actually happens when you get that utility bill? What's on there? What are the things you should look out for? Then we're going to learn what the health is of our utility customers right now. How are they doing managing the bills they're getting in their inbox or their mailbox every month? From there, I'm going to do some high-level concerns from PULP as far as what we're seeing, and then hand it over to our advocate friends at the Building Decarbonization Coalition and WEAC to talk a little bit more about New York Heat, as well as the different energy affordability programs out there. So it looks like we're having a couple of issues getting our slides up, but I'm good to keep rolling. So I could talk about this all day, every day, and probably could do it in my sleep. So when we get the slides up, we can go to the slide that talks about utility rate structures. And in New York, when you get that utility bill, it's broken into 2 sides and 2 completely different universes. There's a supply side and a delivery side. The supply side of your bill is unregulated. It's volatile. It completely is based off of the market that Con Ed or National Grid purchase that electric or gas that then is delivered to you. Beautiful. That's the slide. Supply charges are not regulated by New York State. In New York State, we have a Public Service Commission, a 7-member body picked by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and underneath them is the Department of Public Service, the staff arm to the commission. That DPS staff, they're the ones who are regulating our utilities, but they do not touch the supply side at all. So that is very volatile. During the pandemic, when there was a decrease in supply and increase in demand, the supply side was going insane. And I know constituent service teams across the state were getting calls from customers who were really worried about what they were seeing in their utility bills. So supply side, very different. Delivery side is regulated. This is the meat and potatoes of the rate case. We have 3 going on right now alone: Con Edison, National Grid Upstate, Central Hudson. Actually, I forgot about Little Liberty Gas Upstate, as well as Corning Natural Gas. So New York actually has 5 energy rate cases happening right now. And the delivery side of the bill is the cost that that utility company can charge you to actually deliver the electric and gas to your home. And you can get down to the penny in these rate cases. It's how many customer service representatives they're hiring, the poles, the meters, the transmission, the infrastructure. All of that goes into the delivery side of your bill and is the battle we have in those rate cases. We can go to the next slide. So that was a lot of big terminology, supply, delivery, but what does this mean for the ratepayers? We get a bill every single month, and there's a lot of information on there, but it can be confusing, it can be overwhelming. So one of the things that PULP tries to do is just kind of help empower people to look at their bills, to understand what might be going on, and then troubleshoot why they might be falling behind. So with the Con Ed bill, and Lisa, you can advance to the next, we have some motion in here with boxes. So we always encourage people to look at what happened in their last billing cycle. So what happened last month? How much electric and gas did I use? What was I charged? I made a payment. Did Con Ed get my payment? Did they actually credit me for my payment? All of this might sound very, low level, but it's important. You want to make sure that you're being charged the appropriate amount, that you're making payments and they're getting it. So we always check that piece. Then we do the cross compare. So the new charges, what happened this month? How much am I being charged? How much electric did I use? How much gas did I use? And you can do that cross compare. Con Edison has a really nice chart system on the first page of their bills that helps that individual understand what my average usage was for a year. And I can also cross compare going back. What happened last month? What happened last year at this time? That's really important for checking out what might be happening. If you get a spike in your bill, but your usage hasn't gone up, does that mean my rates have gone up? What might be that core problem? We also, and I use the Con Ed bill as a sample because honest to goodness, out of all the bills we deal with across the state, I find the Con Ed ones the easiest to read. And they have these messages for you at the bottom left-hand corner. They have these little megaphones. It is tremendously important to check those every month because they can warn, hey, Laurie, supply prices might be going up next month. You might want to conserve on energy. Or guess what? New York State has a new bill credit program because of the state budget. Make sure to be ready for that. And so we really like this as an example and encourage people to check that section every month. Going to the next slide. This is the meat and potatoes. This is everything we talked about earlier about supply and delivery, and it can be very overwhelming for people. The way the Con Ed bill reads, and each utility is a little different, but the electric portion's at the top and the gas portion is underneath. Advancing to the next image, you'll see that supply, which we talked about a minute ago, that's the volatility. That's where things can spike. It's not regulated. Your supply charges on the Con Ed bill are on the left. And so it's good to always check, okay, how much electricity did I use this month? How much gas supply did I use? And they calculate it. For the electric side, it's how many kilowatt hours you use. For the gas side, it's how many therms you use. Those are the metrics. And so it's a good idea just to check there and see what that supply side is. The delivery side, again, is that regulated portion that is set by the commission through the rate cases. And this is a very interesting piece here, and I'll get to that in a moment. The next image, though, I want to show is something, again, that may seem very simple, but it's how are they reading your meter? Unfortunately, there have been several utility companies that have been in trouble in the last couple of years for relying on estimated meter readings, not actually going to the home, not getting an actual reading, or maybe that person's meter isn't working and they've been estimating for a very, very long time. Customers deserve to get charged what they're actually using. And so it's extremely important every month to make sure you're getting an actual meter reading. So we highlight this for people every single day to check that. Back to delivery side now. Advancing to the next image, the basic service charge is a charge that is set in the rate cases. This again is a big battle we have when it comes to what that electric delivery basic service charge should be and what it should be on gas. It's supposed to be a fixed charge, and they put a portion of, again, meters, customer service teams, the billing, that gets in there as a set fee. But the problem is it doesn't fluctuate depending on how much you use. So if you were in the hospital, and we hear this all the time, we have low-income customers who are in the hospital or they were out of their home for an extended period of time, they will still get hit with an $18.70 charge on electric and $27.84 charge on the gas, even if they weren't in the home. And so this is a piece that we find very regressive in New York State rate making, because we have people, again, who are low income, they don't want to turn on that heat, they're turning the lights off, and they still get hit with this every single month. And if you add it up, it's almost immediately $50 on a bill. Once you start going down the charges, and to save time, I'm not going to go through every one of them, but the delivery piece there is important. That's set by the case, as well as the different charges. There's some that are NYSERDA and whatnot. So going back one slide, thank you so much to Lisa, who is our maestro of slides here. Yes, thank you. So I used a Con Ed bill because, again, I find them very easy to read in comparison to some of the other utilities. So these are just the first pages of NYSEG on the left and Central Hudson on the right. I find this fascinating. I know I live in the utility world every day, but it's very similar information, but presented in completely different ways, and can be extremely overwhelming for people to read. So just a couple examples here of how utilities do their bills throughout New York. And again, just the struggle in trying to understand what you owe and how much and when. So thank you. And now we'll go to the next slide. So once people get those bills and they're trying to pay, and PULP is, again, trying to work with them on their usage and what's owed and what financial assistance programs are out there, the truth is that a lot of New Yorkers are falling behind in all income brackets. And the utilities legally have to report on how their customers are doing every month. It's called a collection activity report. And as Betta mentioned earlier, as of December, 1.3 million residential electric and gas customers are behind on their bills by 60 days or more, for over $1.85 billion. This is extremely high. It's one of the highest points in the entire history that we're aware of. And so again, we're very concerned. Moving to the next slide. Just again, highlighting some of what we're seeing on the ground. These are actual termination notices that have come into our helpline. The individual on the left is a Con Ed customer who owed over $6,000 in December. And to keep their service on, Con Ed was asking for a down payment of $504, which is just absolutely unaffordable and not possible. This individual is really struggling, and PULP has been working with them to try and negotiate a payment agreement to keep their service on. But they also received this notice on their door warning them they had 72 hours to figure out what could stop the shutoff before Con Ed would come back. Moving to the next bill, something we wanted to show real quick is the snowball. So again, we see on average people owing anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000. That's very, very common these days. But one of the snowballs that we're really worried about is the late fees. This individual owes over $3,000 to Con Ed, and in 1 month, they wanted $46 in late fees, which just seems astronomical. Moving to the next slide, and this is where we're going to end here and then transfer over to our friends in a moment at Building Decarbonization Coalition. We're really worried. The arrears are very high. It's not just low-income individuals either. And so while New York doesn't have a moratorium on shutoffs in the winter, a lot of the utilities kind of slow down during the winter. And so at PULP, we're kind of treating April 16th as a doomsday. That is the day after the end of heating season in New York. We're really worried, seeing how high those arrears are, that the utilities are going to go and just do mass shutoffs when we get that first beautiful day. And so while we hope for that first beautiful spring day, and I think we all need it, in PULP land, we are preparing and we are scared because we know our helpline is already going off the charts, and I don't know what's going to happen by April 16th. Another thing to flag really quickly is those arrears. Again, that debt, that $1.85 billion, that could to some degree turn into what's called uncollectibles. If someone's account is terminated or shut off or closed for a significant period of time, the utility has the right to take whatever is left over once that account is closed and move it to what's called uncollectibles. They can then seek recovery of uncollectibles from all ratepayers in that service territory. The current Central Hudson rate case in the Hudson Valley, 30% of what Central Hudson is asking for is uncollectible recovery because their customers have had such high arrears there. And that means then if they get approved, that 30% increase will be a cost that is spread out to all ratepayers to make up for the uncollectibles. The last thing I just wanted to flag is you're going to hear about the Energy Affordability Program from WEACT in a little bit. We absolutely are so proud of EAP. It is a monthly discount for low-income customers. It is tremendously successful. We have in our budget testimony some statistics on how customers in EAP who are low-income fall behind less than those who are not in EAP. And so we do believe that if you can get families into this program, it ultimately will help all ratepayers save money and stop those uncollectibles from growing. So thank you so much for having PULP here today. I am now going to have Lisa advance to Building Decarbonization Coalition's slides, where they're going to talk to you about some really interesting ways to save money when it does come to that gas side and New York heat.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and thank you so much to Assemblymember Simon, Assemblywoman Tapia, and Senators Harckham and Krueger. My name is Allison Considine, and I'm the Senior Campaign Manager for the Building Decarbonization Coalition in New York. The BDC aligns critical stakeholders on the path to transform the nation's buildings through clean energy, and the BDC and its members are charting the course to eliminate fossil fuels in buildings to improve people's health, cut climate and air pollution, prioritize high-road jobs, and ensure that our communities are more resilient to the impacts of climate change. So I'm going to be focusing on how the New York Heat Act can enable affordable system electrification, upgrading whole neighborhoods by leveraging funds that we would otherwise be spending on the aging gas system and redirecting them to neighborhood scale whole home electrification. I'll explain how the same financial tools of cost sharing and depreciation that have facilitated the growth of our current energy system can be used to facilitate building upgrades if we free up and redirect that money from gas pipe replacement. Next slide, please. So we just saw a similar utility bill from Laurie, and I'm gonna just ground us really quickly again on that delivery charge side. So like Laurie explained, supply charges are a pass-through cost. They fluctuate according to the market. And supply charges aren't really what's driving these extreme cost increases for gas ratepayers. It's the delivery charge side, where we have all of the capital expenses that support the system, the thousands of miles of gas mains and pipes. This is the big expense, and this is where I'm going to be focusing today on the opportunity to redirect money from that into whole home electrification. Next slide, please. So like Laurie talked about, people's bills are rising. We're seeing this across the state. This data was compiled from joint proposals from the 5 major utilities by the Alliance for a Green Economy. And just to move through quickly, we can see it happening from Central Hudson to National Fuel Gas out in Buffalo. Next slide, please. To Con Ed, Kedley and Kedney. Next slide, please. In Brooklyn. Next slide, please. And this is really a crisis, like Laurie just explained. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we start to act to shift this problem. So we might be wondering, how have utilities historically kept this gas delivery charge low? Why is this crisis getting worse and worse today? They've leveraged a formula of an expanding customer base, so more and more people joining the gas system, which allows them to spread the costs out over many people, and depreciation, or spreading the costs out over a multi-decade time horizon. This has enabled them to keep those delivery charges relatively low. Like Laurie said, it's still, often $50 when you add up the electric and gas delivery charges, even without usage. But this has allowed them to keep this month-to-month cost relatively low, even though they're making quite large capital expenditures. Next slide, please. The problem is this system only works so long as the gas system continues to expand. As customers leave the gas system, these costs are going to be spread over fewer and fewer people, and the costs for those remaining are going to go up. Next slide, please. So this is what's happening in real time today. We are in an unmanaged transition. Some folks are choosing to get heat pumps and to electrify their home and disconnect it from the gas system. Others are not. This choice to get heat pumps to electrify is not being coordinated with the retirement of the gas pipes that serve the neighborhood that those folks live in. So for their neighbors who are on gas, their rates are rising. Next slide, please. Because home electrification isn't currently well coordinated with gas pipe retirement, the customers remaining are taking on the high costs of repairing and replacing pipe that's at the end of its useful life. And in New York, we have a lot of pipe that's at the end of its useful life. We have thousands and thousands of miles of gas pipe, some of which are over 100 years old. And every time a mile of that gas line needs to be repaired and replaced, it costs on average $6 million. If you spread that out over the average of 100 customers served by a mile of gas main, that works out to $60,000 per customer. Now, again, you're not seeing that initial impact on your bill because it's spread out over customers and over time. But this is a really, really expensive system. Next slide, please. So again, we're currently in this unmanaged transition off pipeline gas. We're paying for two systems. We're paying for the gas system and we're paying for the electric system. And we're having that decreasing customer base on the gas side. So this is really risky. It's risky for costs, for customers, for equity, and for reliability. What we need is a plan to have a managed phased transition off that gas system that protects customers and manages cost. That plan is what New York Heat provides. Next slide, please. Rather than replace gas pipe, utilities could invest in neighborhood-scale electrification, including tools like thermal energy networks and home energy upgrades like heat pumps and all-electric appliances. Utilities could plan the transition to replace sections of gas system that are at the end of their useful life and can be retired, and redirect that money to upgrading and electrifying homes. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering, how do we pay for this? We're going to use the same exact formula we've used to fund our current energy system. The utility bill for the homeowner would include the supply charge and the delivery charge. That delivery charge would be the fee from the utility to cover the cost of installing and operating neighborhood-scale home electrification. So the cost of electrifying and upgrading homes would be treated the same way we treated the cost of gas infrastructure, spread out over the rate base and over time. Next slide, please. If we can strategically plan and redirect spending, then we don't need to pay for two systems simultaneously. We can start to move from the gas system to an all-electric system. Next slide, please. We would use the same tools, an expanding customer base and depreciation, to keep costs down. Next slide. And you might remember that it costs, on average, $60,000 per customer to cover a mile of gas line replacement. It costs, on average, $16,300 to electrify a home in New York. Depending on the needs of the house, that can be more: weatherization and energy efficiency upgrades, other remediation. Either way, ratepayers would be coming out ahead if we stopped spending money to repair old gas lines and instead invested that in upgrading people's homes. And in addition, we would have healthier, safer homes for folks to live in. Next slide. So we really see this as a major opportunity for the legislature to act to protect families from spending billions of dollars on New York's aging gas systems and to build healthier homes in the process. We're hoping that this is the year, like Betta said, that we can take this step to system-wide change so that we're not continuing to face rising gas rates and can really get to the root of the problem. I'm now going to pass it to my colleague Annie from WeAct, who's going to talk through some of the more nitty-gritty aspects of how the 6% provision in New York Heat and the Energy Affordability Program can protect ratepayers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Good morning, everybody. My name is Annie Corforo. I am the Climate Justice Campaign Manager here at WeAct for Environmental Justice. I'm going to jump right into chatting with everybody here about some of the tools that we have at our disposal to reduce energy burdens in New York State. Next slide. Very quickly, for those that are not familiar with WeAct, we are a community-based organization. We were founded back in 1988 in Harlem. And we advocate for healthy communities by ensuring that people of color and low-income residents are participating in the creation of sound and fair environmental health and protection policies and practices. We have about 800 dues-paying members and really take notice to the issues that our community are facing on the ground to influence our policy work up in Albany. Next slide. Yeah. So I want to take us on a little history lesson, but not too far back to about 2015, 2016, when the PSC opened a proceeding to examine low-income programs offered by major electric and gas utilities in New York State. And the stated purpose of this proceeding was to standardize utility low-income programs, reflect best practices where appropriate, and really to identify how to evaluate effectiveness of current low-income programs and designs, and develop a set of recommendations for improvements that may be warranted. And there were a couple of major takeaways from this proceeding that the order came out in 2016. First was that the PSC adopted a policy that no household in New York should pay an energy burden above 6% of household income. And this was really targeted at low-income households. There are about 2.3 million low-income households in New York, the majority of which are paying over 6% of their monthly income on utility bills. We're finding in New York City, some households are paying up to 25% of their monthly income towards utilities, which is unsustainable and untenable, especially with the cost of living, that's rising across the state. So this was very exciting to see the PSC commit to an energy affordability guarantee goal. It also established the statewide energy affordability program, which Laurie mentioned. This program is a lifesaver. It directed electric and natural gas companies to develop monthly bill discounts for customers that have been identified as low income. And it is working. Laurie mentioned some stats in her testimony that I think are important to share. During the pandemic, the overall arrears for low-income households that were enrolled in EAP rose at a much lower rate than those that were not enrolled. So EAP participants, their arrears rose by only 50%, where folks that were not enrolled in EAP, they saw their arrears rise by 89%. So EAP is a program that is working. Now, there are some challenges that I'm going to get into on my next slide. So I think advocates were really excited. In 2016, we saw the PSC tackling energy affordability head on. But since 2016, we have not seen much movement. Since 2016, 1 in 4 households are still paying more than 6% of their income on energy bills. As I mentioned, some households are paying exorbitantly high percentages of their monthly income. We're also seeing utility debt rise. I'm not going to jump into this because Laurie's already talked about this, but this 1.8 billion is reaching numbers that we haven't seen since the COVID-19 pandemic, and those were extreme circumstances where there was a lot of uncertainty, people losing their jobs. But we are now, this is a regular time. I mean, there's never really a regular time, but we're seeing utility debt, that has been sky high since 2020, not really going down for customers. And despite progress, we've only seen in about 42% of eligible households are enrolled in EAP. That means that 57%, there are about 1.5 million households across New York State that are eligible but are not enrolled in this program and are not receiving these monthly bill credits. And despite the promises from the 2016 Energy Affordability Order, we have not seen the PSC take any comprehensive action to address energy affordability, which is why we are seeing these persistently high issues of energy and energy burden. We can go into the next slide. So that's where the New York Heat comes in, and the New York Heat does a lot of things, but one piece of it is that it would really help achieve the 6% goal and help us overcome a lack of political will in the PSC by requiring them to develop a plan on how they want to achieve the 6% energy burden goal within 1 year of the bill's passage. I want to emphasize that New York Heat does not dictate how to accomplish this goal, nor does it require the state to put any money towards achieving this goal. It's really just a plan. Plans don't cost anything, but they give us a roadmap of how we're going to accomplish a goal we set back in 2016. And it encourages the PSC to look at all available tools that are at their disposal, at the state's disposal, that are already attempting to address energy burdens. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those. That can include things like bill credits, bill discounts, energy efficiency, rate-making strategies, and as Allison was just discussing, the avoided cost of utility infrastructure. Next slide. So I want to go over a couple, and this list is not comprehensive, but I want to emphasize that there are programs that are being funded from many different avenues, federal, state, utility surcharges, and a lot of these programs are not working comprehensively together to address households with the highest energy burden. And so I want to highlight a couple and mention some improvements that we're seeing. So we've mentioned the Energy Assistance Program, which really is kind of a darling of energy affordability programs. I want to credit PULP. PULP has been calling for an $200 million injection into EAP from the state budget. And that is particularly important in 2025 since legislation is finally passed that's going to be going into effect this year that would ensure that utility customers that are already enrolled in other qualifying programs like Medicaid, like food stamps, Social Security, public assistance, et cetera, are automatically enrolled in EAP. So this is encouraging because we're hoping to see those 1.4 million households we mentioned that are eligible but not enrolled starting to see higher rates of enrollment. And that means that we're going to need additional funding to help keep the program running, and we want to see that coming from the state budget. There's the Home Energy Assistance Program, which is federal funding. This is a bipartisan, very popular program that has been around for decades, that New York receives funding to help with heating bills in the wintertime. In 2024, there was an expansion of the Solar for All program, and there is the hope that the plan will be delivering about $40 per year to low-income households, totaling about $32 million. There's Empower Plus, which are energy efficiency programs. And I want to really highlight energy efficiency is one of the best ways we can reduce energy costs for low-income households. It has an average lifetime savings per dollar spent of about $2.12. Empower Plus is funded through the state budget, RGGI, utility surcharges, and it has overall been a successful program to help, at no charge, improve the shell of people's homes, the insulation, the appliances, et cetera. Other energy efficiency programs like the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is a federally funded program to help lower energy costs for low-income households. We also have programs that are not yet online, but are in the pipeline and are important to address energy burden and things that we shouldn't write off. Cap and invest rebates, which modeling has shown that even at the low end projections, cap and invest could produce $3 billion per year to be investing in decarbonization, and about $1 billion of that would go towards back to households in rebates under the Consumer Climate Action accounts. And that's going to help reduce energy and transportation cost burdens for households. We also have NYPA REACH credits that are coming online. This was part of the Build Public Renewables Act. And the PSC has formally established the program, and it's going to provide bill credits to low-income customers in disadvantaged communities where in utility service territories where NYPA is building and operating new renewable energy projects. There's also, a tool at the PSC's disposal is to look at our rate-making strategies. There's a range of different rate design solutions that the PSC could deploy to help lower costs for the lowest income households. And right now, New York State has pretty regressive rates, which in other words means that the poorest households are paying the most. We could look to other states like Massachusetts for different solutions on how to make our rates more equitable. That could be things like replacing declining block rates with inclining block rates. We could do income-based rates, percentage of payment of income payment plans, time of use rates, the list goes on. And I don't think we have time today to discuss that, but this is kind of a big body of work that the PSC could consider. I want to go on to the next slide and give an honorable mention to, and it looks like, yeah, perfect in the chat. Another program that we act is advocating for, along with Renewable Heat Now this year, is the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Fund. As I mentioned, and I want to emphasize this again, energy efficiency programs are some of the best way to lower costs long-term for households. But New York has a very old housing stock, and our lowest income residents are typically the ones living in housing that is the oldest, has the most deferred maintenance, and is dealing with legacy hazards like mold, lead, asbestos, foundation issues, roof leaking, water intrusion, leak. Oh my goodness, issues with the structure of the home. And a lot of these issues are not covered by existing programs. And so what the GAP Fund would do is exactly that. It would fill the gaps in existing programs to make sure that people are not denied access to these very important federal, state, and locally funded weatherization and energy efficiency programs. So it would cover a The eligible projects is pretty non-prescriptive, and that's by design because every house is different, but it can cover things like the mitigation of environmental hazards, the testing and replacement of insulation, septic and plumbing system repairs, roof foundation or wall repairs, water intrusion mitigation, and electrical and wiring upgrades. Really doing all of the work to help make sure that every household is now eligible to upgrade their appliances, to weatherize, to lower their energy bills long term. This is such an important bill that we need to see funded immediately because there are, I would say NYSERDA doesn't do a ton of tracking of denials, but what we are hearing anecdotally on the ground from contractors and from people who are really working in households is that there are millions of households across the state that can't get into these programs that are going to help them lower their bills because of the prevalence of these issues with no funding or, really help to address them. Next slide. And I'm going to pass it back to Betta to close this out.
Wow. Okay. That was a lot of information. Thank you all so much for sticking with that and for our incredible advocates. Your expertise and depth of knowledge is really, it always astounds me. Even though I'm in the trenches with you, the work is just really impressive and amazing. And we got to get this over the finish line. So here we have a really, brief summary about getting New York Heat in the budget, passing it as soon as possible, making sure that there's a $200 million to shore up the energy affordability program, expanding the EAP so it includes and helps moderate income households, another $100 million for that, and then $150 million to create a heat cooling benefit, which now more than ever, we need to help people in those sweltering summer months, right? Because that can be a matter of life and death, especially for seniors. And then, of course, the GAP fund we just heard about. So hopefully that's top of mind. All of these things are absolutely critical, and we need your support to get them in the budget and make sure that these items are prioritized. So I just want to open it up. If anybody has questions, I know we don't have a ton of time. We covered a lot of information here, but would love to hear from you if anyone has a question for our presenters. And I don't need to be spotlighted, so I'll just see if anybody has a question. I know, or okay. Yes. Susanna?
Great. Thank you so much. This has been excellent. So I think this question is for Laurie. When you were talking about the uncollectibles, is that available for any utility across the state? And I think you said that they have to ask for a PSC approval, and do they usually get approved?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And so yes, each utility company does have the right to seek, the uncollectibles for a large portion, if not the entire uncollectible amount, to be subsidized for all ratepayers in that service territory. The triggering mechanism is either a separate petition where the utility actually files and says, okay, we're Con Ed, we have this much, this is what we'd like you to approve, or they can do it in the rate case. And so that's what's happening in Central Hudson right now, where they're actively seeking that recovery through the rate case.
If Central Hudson actually bothered to bill people regularly and credit anyway, never mind.
A lot of confusion as always around all of this, but thankfully we have you, Laurie, and PULP to help people navigate the utility waters. I mean, just reading your bill alone is like virtually impossible. Like, how do we make bills simpler and easier for people to understand? Okay, we've got some great questions in the chat. One about the GAP fund. I think I understand James's question about does the electrification cost per house include new generation infrastructure? The GAP fund is for pre-electrification work. So I don't to enable households to be able to electrify or install solar panels by doing that, taking care of some of those deferred maintenance issues. Let's see, any other question? Oh, for the New York Heat Act. Okay, well,